All right, so first off, think of this as kind of 3 5-minute talks in a row, because I'm pretty informal. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, let me know. And a disclaimer, I can only tell you what I did. I clearly don't have the answer for everybody, and this is only the answer that worked in the past. It's not really induction, so I don't know that it'll work in the future necessarily. Okay, so I'm gonna set the scene for you. My friend Kate was teaching an Introduction to Proofs class, IBL style. She's never been to the RL Moore conference. We don't really have great support with IBL at our school yet. We're both grad students, so we were kind of sneaking it under the radar. I had done it the year before. So she's teaching this Intro to Proofs class. She thought it was going pretty well. Then she finds out that her students have gone to the course coordinator to complain about her without talking to her first. They've gone to complain that Kate is never giving them an answer and they don't know what's right and what's wrong. So she has to have a meeting with her course mentor because this is all through a special program. So she meets with her course mentor who tells her she's never allowed to let a problem go longer than during class period. Everything has to be solved during the class period. She can't let anything stay open past that. He came to observe her and also told her that she needed to lecture and she should probably just do problems with the students in class. She should stand at the board. So Kate was pretty determined that she was going to make IBL work out. And this mentor, by the way, I should say, was a student who learned through the Moore method at Georgia Tech. So it was interesting that he was not for it. So she really wants to keep using it, but she's not really sure how to make all of her students happy. So to back up a little bit. So anytime you go into a proofs-based course, which we've all done, it's a huge change. All of a sudden now you have to have not only just the right last line, but that stuff in the middle matters now. Before it was always, as long as you got to the end answer, it didn't really matter. We don't have the back of a book to check anymore, and you're pretty much given the first and last line. You also have the problem of how are you going to motivate these students? In our classes, when we teach Intro to Proofs math ed, students have to take it, and a lot of times they don't see where they are ever going to be writing a proof again, and this is just this horrible class they have to take. They've been told they're going to have to take it twice, and they come in with this attitude that they're going to fail. I had one student who came in with this attitude. His name was Jason. And Jason came in every day, and every day before and after class told me that he was going to fail the class, and he was freaking out, and he just didn't ever think he was going to have this aha moment that he kept seeing all of his other classmates have, where they just got it. He came in with von Neumann quote that you don't really ever understand math, you just get used to it, and he was pretty sure that's how it was going to be for him. He was just going to get used to it, and he just wanted to teach 8th grade geometry anyway, and why did he need to learn proofs? And then one day he came in, and he had been student teaching in an 8th grade class, and one of the students had asked him a question that he didn't know the answer to. And so he said, I had to sit down with a piece of paper, and I wrote it out, and I realized it was true, and then I realized I had written down the formal proof for it, and I said, oh no. And that was when he realized where he was going to use proofs, to be able to explain to the students why something was true, and to be able to answer their questions. And he did end up having an aha moment, on a test nonetheless. He came up at the end of the test, slapped it in my hand, and said, I know number 4 is right, you don't even have to read it. I had my aha moment, it made sense. I said, all right. So it's kind of tough to tell when these students are at the line of frustrated versus I'm going to give up. And a lot of times when I taught the class, they would be right at that line, and then they would fall over all of a sudden, and I had no idea what had happened. So how could I help them know that they've reached an answer without becoming an expert? And by the way, after last night's talk, I looked up the word expert, and I don't like the definition of it, but I like its origin, which purely comes from the word meaning experience, which I think is what it should mean. Just somebody with experience. Doesn't mean you know everything. So these are some of the questions that we talked about. So Kate came to me because I had taught the class IBL the year before her and asked me if I'd come watch her class. And we talked about some of the things that might be going on. I thought it was probably some miscommunication between the students and her, and maybe they had voiced that they were not getting the final answer, but Kate had missed it somewhere along the way. We talked about some of the adjustments I had to make when I was teaching the class. So I had a mentor as well who would come watch me and give me observation notes. For instance, don't have the students ask you questions and then you redirect, just have them ask straight to the class, et cetera, et cetera. I pulled my class pretty regularly, at least once a week, if not more, would send emails and have them just let me know how it was going. How do you feel when you leave class? Do you want to cry? Do you hate this textbook? Do you want to, throw your homework out the window, or do you love it and talk about it to your family? I just want to know how you're doing. For instance, I did not want to lecture at all, And my students wanted me to lecture a little bit. They felt like they had no idea what a model proof looked like when we started a new section, and they wanted to know what their proofs should look like. So we compromised a little bit, and I stood at the board and wrote down what they said and sometimes corrected words, and they felt like I had given them a model proof. All I did was act as a transcriber, but they felt better about it, so it was all right. I was also part of an email cohort from this workshop, and that was super helpful, so I could throw all kinds of questions out there. You know, I came home today and I wanted to cry because nothing worked, or here's something really awesome that happened, how can I make it happen again? If any of you all went to Dana's lecture yesterday, I was there when the felt tip pen idea came up. When he mentioned it, I said, I was there on that email. And the thing that I found most important when I taught was open communication, which is what I thought Kate was probably missing, but I wasn't sure. So I went to watch the class, and I was really only supposed to observe, but I'm not really good at that. So I ended up meddling just a little bit. So at the very beginning, they did a review on the board of what they'd done the time before. And they wrote up a sketch of a proof, which I was already a little iffy on. It was sketchy. It wasn't a formal proof. It wasn't really in a good proof format, which maybe towards the end of this course is okay, but we were still within the first couple months, and they're still having trouble figuring out what a proof is. So maybe notes on a proof, not the best idea. She asked if they had any questions, and they said no. And she said, okay, well, then let's move on. And I was like, I have questions, and I'm pretty sure that that means they have questions. So we need a little more wait time. But she went on. She asked if anybody had done the next problems for the class, and no one had. So we've got a problem now. They're not doing their problems, but sometimes that happens. And like they said earlier, sometimes the day where nobody has anything can be a great day. So she split them in half to work on the next two problems. And this is where I started meddling. I wasn't content to sit in the back and just watch people work on math, because that's no fun for me. So I started listening to the students' work. And there were two guys towards the back of the classroom that were working on this proof. And they had the wrong form of a definition. So they were working on divisors, and rather than writing a equals m times n, they had a over m equals n, which is how we all learn what factors are pretty much in the beginning, but not really helpful in a proof because you need the multiplication to be able to go somewhere. And I tried to point that out to them. They didn't really seem to get it, so we kind of let that one go. Nobody thought to look in their notes for a definition at any point in time, which should have seemed pretty obvious, but it didn't seem to dawn on them. They seemed pretty content to just sit there and be like, well, I don't really know. I guess we'll just wait another 5 minutes and somebody will put it on the board. Kind of that in the video that we saw earlier of the two different classrooms, the first classroom that was sitting there silently, doing the look that I know really well, the I'm going to pretend like I know what's going on and look back and forth and make this face, and then somebody will put it on the board and I'll be safe. So finally, with a little bit of nudging, I got one student to figure out how to do it. And after that, the other student was still lost. But at that point, I was like, tap out, your turn, I'm out, and made the other student explain it to him. They eventually got through it. So I moved to the other side of the room where they were working on the other half of the problem. And it actually turned out that on that side, it was kind of one big group with a few people scattered out working on their own. And one of the students in the big group was a student I had had the semester before. So he knew I was a ringer. Nobody else knew I was a teacher, really. So he ratted me out to the others as being a teacher. But there were two students in the back who were just completely lost, not even working on the problem they were supposed to be working on, because they still don't understand the problem from the last time that they had just done the sketch of on the board. So it's kind of a hierarchy of needs is how I think about it in my head. If I'm still stuck on the proof from beforehand, I'm not going to start trying to work the next one because I'm thinking about what in the hell happened over here. Totally lost. Not always. I mean, sometimes you can jump around a little bit. But in this case, they felt very unresolved and that everyone else had gotten an answer and they were lost. So we talked a little bit about the two proofs from the last time. What had happened was they had done the proof and they'd done it in one way and then used another method to do it on the other side of the board. But it turns out both were just proof sketches. So now they thought there was something wrong with one of them but not with the other, and they couldn't remember which one was the right one, which I looked at them and realized they were both right, just not complete. And I'm thinking what happened when I talked to Kate later is that they had gone through and then gotten to a point where she thought everybody could do the math from there, and they'd said, okay, well, I'll let you finish it. But it turns out they didn't know what they needed to do to finish it. They forgot what they were trying to prove, and now they have these fractions, and I don't know where you're going. So we talked through a little bit and came to the want to show statement, which seemed to help a little bit. And I'm definitely guilty of getting halfway through a proof, forgetting what I'm trying to prove and being like, well, I'm done. So we talked it through a little bit, and the girl was able actually to go back and do both sides of the proof, and she felt pretty resolved, so then we started working on the next one. And she didn't get very far on the next one. She wrote down a definition, the definition of the main word, and it was a good statement of the definition. So I was pretty excited about it. And the whole time I was doing this, Kate was circulating too, which I have kind of mixed feelings on the teacher circulating when you're working in groups, because I don't want to influence anyone. Ed Parker always told me that he never wanted to take anyone's aha moment away from them. And I never want a student to say, oh, well, I got it, but that's only because she helped me. I couldn't have gotten it on my own. So when I taught, sometimes I would circulate if we looked really stuck. Sometimes I'd just stand awkwardly and listen. Sometimes I'd stand at the front of the room. Sometimes I'd tell them I'd race them and see if I could do it first. And they beat me sometimes. You know, whatever. I haven't seen this in a while. It's fair. So then she asked for a volunteer to write the proof on the board. And one of the students reluctantly went to the board, wrote the proof down in the smallest handwriting I've ever seen in my life with the worst marker that had no ink in it, sideways and not really in sentences, and turned around and said, that's it, and then went and sat down. And everybody else was like, okay, that looks right, yeah. They clearly weren't checking. I don't think anybody read it. And Kate seemed a little bit like, does anybody have questions? No, okay, well, we'll move on. And I was like, whoa, I have questions. I need him to go back up there. And the student just looked at me and I was like, no, I'm serious, go back up there, I have questions. And halfway through the proof, I had stopped him and said, I can't read that. Can anybody else back here read it? And the whole back row was like, yeah, no, we have no idea what's going on. You could have said something at some point before this. So I asked some questions. And I definitely asked him, not Kate, which threw him off a little bit. But, I mean, I'll play the dumb student. Sometimes I am the dumb student. So he read through the proof, and he added in some stuff, and some of the kids asked some questions at this point. And then he was talking about, you know, I'm not really sure what I could do to make this more clear. And at this point, I said, oh, well, this girl next to me has this great statement of the definition that I think maybe if you put, like, right before you started doing your proof would just really help reiterate what you're going to do. And so she looked embarrassed, but she read it out, and the rest of the class was like, yeah, that is a really good definition. Yeah, good job. I mean, all you did was copy it out your notes, but they weren't looking at their notes anyway, so nobody knew that. And then class ends without what I would call a complete proof. They wrote something on the board. It had it in. There was a square box colored in, but I don't think everybody agreed on it. I don't think everybody understood it, so no general consensus, no proof, in my opinion. So after class, Kate and I talked a little bit. I told her some things that I think you should do. Always make a positive comment. Be Mr. Freaking Positive. Even if it's just, you have great handwriting. That's big enough that I can read it back here. Don't you guys agree? That's awesome. That was a good statement of the proof. I think it really helped clear some things up. Anything you got? Encourage the students to be willing to fail, which is something that's really important and has been touched on a little bit. In my class, when I taught, I told them that if they didn't fail, they wouldn't pass the class. Because I want you to go up to the board and fail. And in fact, I use it as kind of makes me feel better about myself when I mess up on the board, because I'm like, see, look at how much we just learned from when I failed. That was practice. I didn't mean to do that, not at all. The most important advice I was given when I was here was don't do the problems ahead of time. And it's important that you have a problem set that somebody has thought about a whole lot. So I used someone else's notes. But I didn't do the proofs ahead of time. I looked at them to make sure I knew the definitions I'd need. This way, when somebody starts outlining a proof, if it's a different way than I was thinking about doing it, I don't automatically start doing the like. And I actually have to listen and think about it just like the students do, so I can tell if the pacing is okay. Adapt to what the students need. So if you need to give mini lectures, do it. If they're not going to talk, then you can hand out note cards with a little prompt on it, like, I'm lost from here to here. I don't understand how you got from this line to that line, et cetera, et cetera. Stress the importance of group agreement. The whole class has to agree on the proof before I consider it done. And actually agree. No peer pressure. You need to actually agree. And if a student seems like they're getting peer pressured, I'll play the dumb student. And what Kate told me afterwards when I left class is, oh, I get it. You just act like a student. You asked questions that you would ask if you were in this class. Yeah, because those are the questions they have. So the last thing, how important is the final answer? And in short, I'd say it's very important. They need to see a final proof. They need to know where the final proof ends. I didn't do any sketchy proofs in my class, and I don't think I would. But what's the teacher's role in it? Because I'm not going to give it to them. I don't think it's that we need to give them a proof, it's that we need to make sure they eventually get it. So if you have to take a couple classes, each class keep coming back to it. So about that one that we did last time and we didn't finish, we didn't ever get a formal proof, what do you think? You need to give them model proofs so they know what it should look like. Because a lot of times, the math isn't the part they struggle with at the beginning, it's all the syntax. And then once they get the syntax down, you can point out, okay, you're struggling with the math, which is what real mathematicians do. That's where we get lost too. And help them realize when they've reached a final answer. Even if it's just keep asking questions and they're going in circles, that's fine. And that's all I got.